Then she applied for a highly competitive and coveted clerkship on the United States Supreme Court, and she was selected. The justice who thought she was worthy of this high honor was a young lawyer, was none other than Justice Stephen Breyer, whose seat I'm nominating her to fill. Not only did she learn about being a judge from Justice Breyer himself, she saw the great rigor through which Justice Breyer approached his work. She learned from his willingness to work with colleagues with different viewpoints, critical qualities, in my view, for any Supreme Court justice. Now, years later, she steps up to fill Justice Breyer's place in the court with a uniquely accomplished and wide-ranging background. She served both in public service as a federal public defender, and in private law practice as an accomplished lawyer and with a prestigious law firm. If confirmed, she will join Justice Sotomayor as the only other member of the United States Supreme Court who has experience as a trial court judge, a critical qualification in my view, and once again, following the footsteps of her mentor, Justice Breyer, she become the only member of the court who previously served as a member of the United States Sentencing Commission. And she brings additional perspective to the court as well. She comes from a family of law enforcement, with her brother and uncles having served as police officers. That's one reason I expect by the Fraternal Order of Police, the national organization today, said, and I quote, "There's little doubt she has the temperament, the intellect, and the legal experience and family background have earned disappointment." And they went on to say, they're confident she will, quote, "approach her future cases with an open mind and treat issues related to law enforcement fairly and justly." Incredibly, Judge Jackson has already been confirmed by the United States Senate 3 times. First, to serve on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, a bipartisan independent commission I helped design to reduce the unwarranted disparities in sentencing and promote transparency and fairness in the criminal justice system. On the commission, Judge Jackson was known for working with Democrats and Republicans to find common ground on critical issues. Second, she was confirmed by the United States Senate with bipartisan support on the federal district court to administer justice with the special rigors and fairness that come with presiding over trials. And third, she was confirmed with bipartisan Senate vote to serve on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, considered the second most powerful court behind the Supreme Court itself, and the court she once argued cases before as a distinguished advocate. And when Judge Jackson was nominated to the Circuit Court, one of his distinguished retired members, Judge Thomas Griffith, a former general counsel of Brigham Young University and a George Bush appointee to the court, said he backed her enthusiastically, hailing her exemplary legal career in both public and private practice. And he went on to say her careful approach as a trial court judge. Judge Jackson's service on the District Circuit Court, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, is another superb qualification for service on the Supreme Court. 3 of the current Supreme Court justices also served as the D.C. Circuit judges, where Judge Jackson now serves. Her opinions are always carefully reasoned, tethered to precedent, and demonstrate respect for how the law impacts everyday people. It doesn't mean she puts her thumb on the scale of justice one way or the other, but she understands the broader impact of her decisions. Whether it's cases addressing the rights of workers or government service, she cares about making sure that our democracy works for the American people. She listens. She looks people in the eye, lawyers, defendants, victims, and families. And she strives to ensure that everyone understands why she made a decision, what the law is, and what it means to them. She strives to be fair, to get it right, to do justice. That's something all of us should remember, and it's something I've thought about throughout this process. And as a matter of fact, I thought about it walking over here with her. 1 floor below, we have several displays celebrating Black History Month. One of them includes the judicial oath of office taken and signed by Justice Thurgood Marshall himself, an oath that will be once again administered to a distinguished American who will help write the next chapter in the history of the journey of America, a journey that Judge Jackson will take with her family. I hope I don't embarrass him, but her husband, Patrick, a surgeon, Dr. Patrick, stand up, let him see who you are. There you go. They met when they were undergraduate students at Harvard, and he's a distinguished cancer surgeon at Georgetown. And like so many women in this country, Judge Jackson is a working mom. She had her eldest child, Talia, when she was a private lawyer in practice. She had her second child, Layla, when she served as on the U.S. Sentencing Commission. Stand up, Layla. I asked Layla when I showed her through the office whether she'd like to be president. She looked, no. There's other things. Anyway, Layla, you're welcome to be here. Thank you so much. And welcome your sister who's up in school in Rhode Island now. I have children and grandchildren. Let me tell you, Judge, you're always a mom. That's not going to change no matter what you're doing. Whether you're on the Supreme Court or not. And I've always had a deep respect for the Supreme Court and judiciary as a co-equal branch of the government. I mean it. The court is equally as important as the presidency or the Congress. It's co-equal. So today, I'm pleased to nominate Judge Jackson, who will bring extraordinary qualifications, deep experience and intellect, and a rigorous judicial record to the court. Judge Jackson deserves to be confirmed as the next Justice of the Supreme Court. I've met with the chairman and ranking members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Chuck Grassley, and my hope is that they will move promptly, and I know they'll move fairly. Judge Jackson, congratulations, and the podium is yours. Let me pull this out for you. Where is it? There you go. You got it? But okay. See, presidents can't do much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am truly humbled by the extraordinary honor of this nomination, and I am especially grateful for the care that you have taken in discharging your constitutional duty in service of our democracy with all that is going on in the world today. I also offer my sincere thanks to you as well, Madam Vice President, for your invaluable role in this nomination process. I must begin these very brief remarks by thanking God for delivering me to this point in my professional journey. My life has been blessed beyond measure, and I do know that one can only come this far by faith. Among my many blessings, and indeed the very first, is the fact that I was born in this great country. The United States of America is the greatest beacon of hope and democracy the world has ever known. I was also blessed from my early days to have had a supportive and loving family. My mother and father, who have been married for 54 years, are at their home in Florida right now, and I know that they could not be more proud. It was my father who started me on this path when I was a child, as the president mentioned. My father made the fateful decision to transition from his job as a public high school history teacher and go to law school. Some of my earliest memories are of him sitting at the kitchen table, reading his law books. I watched him study, and he became my first professional role model. My mother, who was also a public high school teacher, provided invaluable support in those early days, working full-time to enable my father's career transition while also guiding and inspiring 4-year-old me. My only sibling, my brother Kitaj, came along half a decade later, and I'm so proud of all that he's accomplished. After graduating from Howard University, he became a police officer and a detective on some of the toughest streets in the inner city of Baltimore. After that, he enlisted in the Army, serving 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. I believe that he was following the example set by my uncles who are in law enforcement. You may have read that I have one uncle who got caught up in the drug trade and received a life sentence. That is true. But law enforcement also runs in my family. In addition to my brother, I had 2 uncles who served decades as police officers, one of whom became the police chief in my hometown of Miami, Florida. I am standing here today by the grace of God as testament to the love and support that I've received from my family. I have also been blessed with many dear friends, colleagues, mentors, law clerks. I could not possibly name all of the people to whom I owe great thanks. But I must mention specifically the 3 brilliant jurists for whom I had the privilege of serving as a law clerk at the outset of my legal career. U.S. District Judge Patty Saris in Massachusetts, U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Bruce Selya in Rhode Island, and last but certainly not least, Associate Justice Stephen Breyer of the Supreme Court of the United States. Justice Breyer, in particular, not only gave me the greatest job that any young lawyer could ever hope to have, but he also exemplified every day in every way that a Supreme Court justice can perform at the highest level of skill and integrity while also being guided by civility, grace, pragmatism, and generosity of spirit. Justice Breyer, the members of the Senate will decide if I fill your seat, but please know that I could never fill your shoes. To my dear family, those who are here with me now and those who are watching from home, I am forever indebted to you for your love and support. To my beloved husband, Patrick, thank you for being my rock today and every day for these past 26 years. I love you. To my daughters, Talia and Layla, you are the light of my life. Please know that whatever title I may hold or whatever job I may have, I will still be your mom. That will never change. There are so many other people I would love to be able to address and to thank, but time is short, so let me end by sharing an interesting coincidence that has actually meant a great deal to me over the years. As it happens, I share a birthday with the first Black woman ever to be appointed as a federal judge, the Honorable Constance Baker Motley. We were born exactly 49 years to the day apart. Today, I proudly stand on Judge Motley's shoulders, sharing not only her birthday, but also her steadfast and courageous commitment to equal justice under law. Judge Motley's life and career has been a true inspiration to me as I have pursued this professional path. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed as the next Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, I can only hope that my life and career, my love of this country and the Constitution, and my commitment to upholding the rule of law and the sacred principles upon which this great nation was founded will inspire future generations of Americans. Thank you again, Mr. President, for this extraordinary honor.
I forgot to introduce the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, and the second gentleman. That seems strange to say that, but the second one, Doug Emhoff. They're both here as well, so thank you. Thank you all.
Rock and rolling. Travel Bureau is like reporting this now. Oh my gosh.
This peanuts. I'd never heard of it. I was surprised to.
You're like, trust me, you're gonna get a lot worse.
I was like, then I Google image. I was like, okay. Then finally do. Yeah.
I just have one item for all of you at the top, which is a week ahead. And I know there are a few topics to discuss today during our time together. On Monday, the President will host a celebration to mark Black History Month. He will be joined by the Vice President, Black members of the historically diverse cabinet, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, state and local elected officials, civil rights leaders, and Divine Nine leadership. On Tuesday, as you are all tracking, the President will deliver his first State of the Union address. We will have more of his address to preview in the coming days. On Wednesday, the President and the First Lady will travel to Superior, Wisconsin to discuss how the bipartisan infrastructure law delivers for the American people by rebuilding roads and bridges and creating good-paying union jobs. And on Thursday, the President will hold a cabinet meeting. With that, Steve, why don't you kick us off?
The EU earlier today agreed to hold to place sanctions and asset freezes on Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Russian Foreign Minister. Is the United States going to follow suit?
Following a telephone conversation President Biden held with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and in alignment with the decision by our European allies, the United States will join them in sanctioning President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov and members of the Russian National Security Team. I expect we'll have more specific details out later this afternoon.
Thanks. Additionally, could you detail the level of support the United States government is currently providing operationally to the Ukrainian military and intelligence services as they try to fend off the Russian invasion? Is the U.S. continuing to send weaponry into Ukraine? Is it providing intelligence on Russian movements and tactical communications and the like?
Well, without getting into too many specific details that are sensitive for a range of reasons, we are continuing to deliver on the security assistance package that was announced earlier last fall. All of that has not been delivered yet. We're continuing to provide that assistance. Obviously, we remain in very close touch, of course, with President Zelensky. I think you may have just seen the readout that we just put out that included the President spoke with him earlier today again, and we are in very close touch from our national security team with members of his team as well, and we continue to consider a range of options to provide additional assistance.
And President Zelensky last night said he was target number one of the Russian military. Does the United States have a warning to Russia in the event that if they were to target the Ukrainian president or attempt to capture him or to physically harm him?
Do we have a warning to them?
Yes,
Well,
specifically regarding the head of state.
Well, let me first say that we have been warning for months that for weeks, if not months, that Kyiv falling, that attempts to overturn the leadership of Ukraine is very much in the aspirations of President Putin. So their attempts to do exactly that and their continued progress in moving toward Kyiv and moving toward Ukrainian leadership is aligned with what we have predicted. Obviously, going after the head of state would be a significant, horrific act by Russian leadership, but we remain in contact, as you all have seen from the readout we provided with President Zelensky. He's made clear that he's still in Ukraine, proudly and courageously standing up in the face of the Russian attack, and we are certainly continue to be concerned about the ongoing Russian assault on the country.
Topic, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention right now is announcing new federal mask guidelines that including under them 70% or so of Americans right now live in areas where they are no longer recommended to wear masks indoors in public settings. Is that guidance that will be followed here in the White House, as Washington, D.C. is now not an area recommended anymore for wearing masks indoors?
Sure. Well, we are evaluating our protocols. Obviously, this guidance is just going out now as we speak. I believe Dr. Walensky continues to provide a briefing call with some of your colleagues right now. D.C. currently has a mask mandate until March 1st. We have always followed the most stringent guidelines. That has typically been the CDC, so we will plan to follow that. And in the meantime, we are evaluating our protocols here at the White House. Go ahead.
On President Zelensky, in President Biden's phone call with him, did it come up whether President Biden bring up whether President Zelensky he thinks he should leave the country or not?
That is not. I don't have any additional details to provide. President Zelensky continues to serve as president of Ukraine. He continues to do that courageously in the face of attacks from Russian military. This was a call for the president to reiterate our strong support for him, for the Ukrainian people, and to reiterate and condemn the actions of the Russians.
And on sanctioning Putin and Lavrov, yesterday President Biden had said that was on the table. What changed between yesterday and today?
Well, it has been under consideration and on the table for some time, as you know, and as I just conveyed, the president's strong view and strong principle from the beginning of this conflict, and even before, I should say, has been to take actions and steps in alignment with our European partners, and this is certainly evidence of that.
And just finally on that one, what does sanctioning Putin himself do in the opinion of this administration? A lot of analysts have said that this is more of a symbolic move than anything.
Well, without getting into any specific details, I know you're not exactly asking me this, but sort of about financial assets, et cetera. I will leave that to others to speak to. Certainly the the step that we are doing in alignment and in coordination with the Europeans just sends a clear message about the strength of the opposition to the actions by President Putin and the direction in his leadership of the Russian military. Go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to ask, continuing the questions on sanctions.
Yep.
Today we saw that the Italian government and the German government both said very clearly that they would not veto a move to remove Russia from the SWIFT transaction system. Can you say a word about how quickly you think something like that would happen, and whether you believe that would be another productive tool and perhaps another moment, symbolic or rather an important measure?
Sure. Well, again, the president's principle is taking steps in alignment. We are stronger together, especially as we stand in the face of the Russian military's actions and their invasion of Ukraine. As it relates to SWIFT, we've never taken that off the table, of course, and I'm certainly not taking it off the table today, so certainly there'll be ongoing discussions about that. As you know, SWIFT is a messaging service that connects 11,000 banks, and many would argue that there are ways that the Russian leadership could get around that over the course of time, but it certainly remains an option on the table. In terms of the timeline, I don't have anything to predict for you on that.
We were also reported today that China has actually increased its reserves as opposed to releasing reserves, which could help perhaps with the energy price increases that we're seeing. Have you had, what do you think of that move? And then also, has there been any further communication? Does President Biden intend to talk to President Xi, or can you say a word about what you're doing in terms of trying to convince the Chinese to be supportive?
Well, I would note that also today the IAEA had an informal meeting where they discussed options they could take over the coming days and weeks to help address any volatility in the global markets and the heightening of price volatility. And certainly that meeting today was a chance to consult and continue coordination with partners on global energy supply and security. There's also continuing conversations that we have had from here with partners over the past day. Secretary Granholm spoke with French, German, EU, and UK counterparts yesterday, and we'll continue those conversations. As it relates to China, I would say that the president's view, of course, is that now is the time for leaders of the world to not just speak out clearly against President Putin's flagrant aggression and to stand with the people of Ukraine, but this is not a moment for equivocation or hiding or waiting to see what happens next. It is already clear what's happening, and as a part of that, it's also important to be a part of the effort to mitigate and minimize the impact on global markets and global oil markets. And so I don't have any additional conversations to read out for you, but I would say certainly we all want to be part of the solution here and stand up in the face of aggression to help address the problems.
Are you saying that China is, in fact, equivocating?
All I'm saying is that every country should think about what side of history they want to be on here, and they have the ability to do that. Go ahead.
When did President Biden make the final decision to sanction President Putin?
It was made, it's been on the table for some time, but through coordination and discussion with our European partners over the last day or so.
So he decided in the last 24 hours that he was going to do that?
Again, it's been on the table for some time. His priority and his focus has been on taking steps in coordination, and obviously that decision was made over the course of the last 24 hours and in partnership with our European counterparts.
Does it include a travel ban by chance?
I believe that would be a part of the U.S. Component, yes.
So President Putin would be banned from traveling here?
There's more details of it that, again, will be out later today. There are very limited examples of this being done, as you all know, but that is a standard part. But again, there'll be more details we will have available later today.
Another question on travel. The UK is banning civilian Russian aircraft from its airspace, saying that no aircraft on a service owned, operated, or chartered by a person connected with Russia shall fly in their airspace. Is the United States planning to do the same?
I'm not aware of that being in the plans, but I don't have anything to preview for you.
Okay, and another question. We've seen these predictions from the Defense Department, from the State Department about Kyiv falling to Russia. They've made clear that they believe that is in Putin's sights and that he wants to overthrow the government there. If that happens, what does the U.S. do? What is the response and the role that the United States takes after something like that happens?
Well, I would just reiterate, as we've been warning for months, that Kyiv falling is a real possibility, and we've continued to see Russia's progression. Even as we've seen resistance on the ground, Russia's military continues to advance toward Kyiv. So there is that real possibility. I'm just not going to get into, at this point, hypotheticals of what that will look like or what our response would be.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen.
I just want to follow up on the Putin sanctions again.
Sure.
Based on what you've said so far. So was this decision to coordinate with allies meant to show unity, meant to show that Putin is a pariah, or do you think it will actually have an impact on Putin in practice, given the uncertainty about the extent and location of his wealth?
Sure, I understand what you're asking. I'm just not going to get into specifics about his financial assets from here. Again, I think what is important and what we are hoping the world takes away from this is the unity through which the United States, President Biden, is working with our European partners and allies.
Without getting into details, can you even say if this will or will not impact him, other than showing that he's, an outlier?
Again, I'm not going to get into his personal financial assets. That's typically not something we would do from here. But I would note again that the steps that were taken yesterday and announced yesterday, sanctioning the 10 of the largest financial institutions in Russia, accounting for a huge percentage of their banking capacity, of their financial system capacity, I should say, and even the anticipation of that, has had an enormous impact on Russia, whether it's the currency, the ruble that has fallen, the markets, skyrocketing inflation in Russia. And we also have taken steps to sanction oligarchs around President Putin, people who have benefited from corruption and cronyism in the system, and even their family members to prevent them from having the capacity to move around their assets.
And on the Supreme Court today, the day, it was exactly 2 years ago today that the president made a pledge that he would nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court. Did he factor the timing of that into his decision to announce it today?
No.
Okay. And then can you share any details about the process
Sure.
now that it's over?
Finally, we're free.
Like, you know, how long the interview or interviews were, what they talked about, what led the president to choose Judge Jackson over the other candidates?
Sure. Well, I will share with you the details that we're comfortable sharing at this point in time. And obviously, Judge Jackson will be filling out a range of questionnaires. She will be testifying. She will be considered by the full Senate, and she will be asked a range of questions there. The president interviewed Judge Jackson, Judge Childs, and Judge Kruger on Monday, February 14th in person. He made his final decision and called Judge Jackson last evening. I would note it was after the press briefing last evening. The president called Leader Schumer, Senator McConnell, Speaker Pelosi, and Whip Clyburn all separately this morning to inform them of his decision. I'd also note that the vice president has been very engaged, not just in the decision-making process, as the president talked about during his remarks, but she called former President Obama and former President Clinton as well, and she has also been calling a range of members of Congress as a part of the announcement process.
One more. Did he personally call Kruger and Childs to let them know that he had chosen Judge Jackson?
I don't have any other details on that, but I can tell you that he called Judge Jackson to offer her to tell her he was going to nominate her last evening. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. The State Department just said about the U.S. and Russia that there are still some areas in which the fulfillment of our national security priorities and imperatives require us to engage and coexist. How is it that we are still engaging and coexisting with the Russians?
Well, Peter, I would say diplomacy around the world requires us to engage with countries even where we have strong disagreements, strong opposition, strong condemnation. We've been very outspoken and taken actions against China's human rights abuses, but we have worked with them in other capacities. We are working Russia as a part of the P5+1 as we're working and making progress on an Iran nuclear deal. There's no question that achievement of that would make the world safer. So it is our responsibility, and diplomacy means engaging even with countries where you have strong disagreement and strong opposition.
And just so that we can understand then the approach, that means that you guys will sit here and sanction Vladimir Putin and then send diplomats to go sit on the same side of the table with the Russians to hash out the Iran deal. Is that what's happening?
That's right, Peter, but I don't know why you sound so skeptical. What our job here in the United States and from any government is to take steps that are in the interest of the American people and the United States of America. And part of that would certainly be reducing Iran's capacity and ability to have a nuclear weapon. I think there's no question about that. Russia is a part of the P5+1.
Okay, there's a report in the New York Times that you guys kept asking China to help you stop Russia from invading Ukraine, and they didn't. So what have you guys done throughout this slow-moving Russia crisis that has worked?
In what capacity?
Well, the president talked to Putin, he talked to the G7, he threatened sanctions, he put sanctions in place. Now he says the sanctions are going to take 30 days, or about a month. Do you guys think the people in Ukraine have about a month?
Well, Peter, let me just take a step back and explain to everyone how diplomacy works and how our approach from the United States has worked. What the president has done is he has built a global coalition to stand up in the face of President Putin and President Putin's aggression and invasion of Ukraine. What he has done is he has rallied the world, our European partners, even at cost to them in some capacities, to put in place significant sanctions, historic sanctions that would have a enormous impact on the Russian financial sector. It is President Putin's choice to go to war and invade Ukraine. That is what he has done. It is our choice and our responsibility and the role of the president in the United States to rally opposition and make sure they feel significant pain from that choice. That's exactly what we have done.
And I understand that you're saying that these sanctions will have an impact on Russia, but what good does that do these people in Ukraine who are seeing the news and these U.S. intel assessments that Kiev is going to fall any day?
Well, Peter, first of all, we are the largest provider of humanitarian assistance, of security assistance in the world to the Ukrainian government, which still stands and the biggest supporter of the Ukrainian people, and we will continue to be. And we are leading this global effort to stand up against the aggression of President Putin. And so the president is doing nearly everything in his power to lead the world and stand up against the actions of President Putin. What he will not do is send U.S. troops to fight in Ukraine, because he is not going to put the American public, the American people, or the United States in a position of fighting a war with Russia. Go ahead.
If I can ask you about, we've been watching a lot of the pictures play out from overseas. We've seen anti-war protesters rounded up and arrested in Moscow and elsewhere throughout Russia. We've seen awful pictures coming from throughout Ukraine, including one today that was dramatic of a Russian tank literally rolling over a Ukrainian civilian vehicle. Can you just give us a sense, is the president watching this happen, his reaction to this, his message to those anti-war protesters?
Well, I mean, it's horrific to watch. It's heart-wrenching to watch. And we've all seen the images. The president, the vice president, members of our national security team, and it almost doesn't matter how much you've been through, how many conflicts you've watched over time, and he has unfortunately watched many in a variety of national security roles, to feel heartbroken by what you're seeing happen in Ukraine, in a sovereign country that is having its right to exist threatened by Russia, the aggressor in this case. I would say our message to the Ukrainian people continues to be that we stand with you, we support you, we are going to do everything, humanitarian assistance, economic assistance, continue to provide security assistance, and rally the world to condemn the actions of President Putin.
And to the anti-war protesters in Russia?
Well, first, I think we would say that we are amazed by your courage, your remarkable courage in standing up against what President Putin is doing. It is not easy to protest in many scenarios, but it's certainly not easy to protest against the actions of an autocratic leader, and that's exactly what these protesters are doing.
There's a large room. I'll ask only one last question, which is, as it relates to the Supreme Court, following up on the questions here. The president wanted it to be a bipartisan process. Has met with many Republicans. Chuck Grassley, the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee. 3 Republicans helped confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson in the spring of last year. One of them, Lindsey Graham, today said, among other things, that this selection means the radical left has won President Biden over yet again. The White House's response.
Well, I think what's most important for everybody to know and understand is more about Judge Jackson's record. And what was very compelling and to go back to Weij's question, sorry I didn't answer this part, what was compelling to the president. I talked to him about this morning, and you heard him lay this out in great detail in his remarks. Judge Jackson is someone who very much is in the mold of Justice Breyer, having even clerked for him. She talked about that during his remarks. When she was confirmed as a district judge in 2013, Judge Breyer praised her for being a wise decision and swore her in. And even parts of their biography overlap, time on the Sentencing Commission, time as a federal judge. But it's also how she has approached her role as a judge that was very compelling to the president. She's issued opinions without regard to partisan considerations. She's ruled in favor of Republicans and Democrats. She's ruled for and against the government, regardless of whether the government is led by a Democratic president or a Republican president. Litigants, lawyers, and judges across the ideological spectrum appreciate her ability to be an impartial adjudicator, and that's exactly what you want as a judge. She's even clerked for 3 different federal judges who were appointed by presidents of different political parties. So I would just note all of that to suggest that anyone who is already ruling her out without even meeting with her, engaging with her, and reviewing her extensive record as a fair and just judge, there may be other reasons for that. So go ahead.
Thanks. Do you have any update on the hostages that were reported to be taken at
Chernobyl? I unfortunately don't have an update on that from here at this point. I can check for you after the briefing.
Does the U.S. have any plans to speed up the refugee processing for Ukrainians that do want to come to the U.S., as they did with Afghans that wanted to come to the U.S.?
Well, it's a slightly different circumstance, I will say, because our assessment is that the majority of refugees will want to go to neighboring countries in Europe, many of which have already conveyed publicly that they will accept any refugee who needs a home, whether it's Poland or Germany, and there are probably others who have made those comments. So we are really working in close lockstep with our European counterparts about what the needs are and how to help from our end meet those needs. That certainly means an openness to accepting refugees from Ukraine, but also making sure that all of these neighboring countries who are willing to welcome these refugees, have our support in that effort. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I know the White House has said the U.S. won't be sending troops into Ukraine to rescue Americans who are still there. So what is the U.S. doing about Americans who are still left in Ukraine as the situation gets more dire?
Well, I will first start by saying that we have been warning for months now about the dire circumstances developing in Ukraine and conveying very directly to American citizens they should leave. We have also been in touch from the State Department with every American we can reach. I would point you to them for more specifics on that. And we continue to have the capacity to, help them in a range of ways, even as we don't have a diplomatic presence in Ukraine. We don't have people in the country right now, obviously, but they are in neighboring countries. I would really point you to the State Department for any more specifics.
The president is obviously now going to be in Delaware this weekend. Can you share what he will be doing there? Will he be traveling with members of his national security team? Will he be receiving regular updates on Ukraine?
Sure. He will have a meeting with members of his national security team tomorrow in Delaware. I will note that while every president can work from anywhere they are, because that is how presidencies are equipped, he is traveling to Delaware for the memorial service of a family member, and he will be, that is why he's traveling there this weekend. Go ahead.
Just to follow up on that question, does the president have special secure facilities in Wilmington? We know that obviously at Camp David, that is something available. Given the national security crisis, is that something that is also available?
The president has the capacity to make a secure call from anywhere he is, yes.
Okay. And then on the Supreme Court, how important is it to the president that Judge Jackson receives bipartisan support if she is confirmed, and how much political capital and time and energy is he personally going to put in to getting Republican support for her nomination?
Well, I think, Tyler, let me flip this around a little bit for you and just say the president's view is that when you look at somebody like Judge Jackson, who is extraordinarily qualified, has impeccable credentials. She has been lauded by former Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, who said on her behalf when she was put forward last year, I know she's clearly qualified, but it bears repeating just how qualified she is. Our politics may differ, but my praise for Ketanji's intellect, for her character, for her intellect is unequivocal. That she is somebody who has, and I would also note that former D.C. District Judge Thomas Griffith, appointed by President George W. Bush, publicly supported her D.C. court nomination, and she received a bipartisan letter of support from individuals who co-clerked along Judge Jackson. So I think the bar here should not be what is the president going to do? Of course he's going to engage with Democrats and Republicans. You've seen him operate in that way to date. It is what are Republicans going to do in terms of considering an eminently qualified judge that the president has nominated, who by many standards has shown herself to issue opinions without regard to partisan considerations and ruled in a way that certainly anyone, regardless of their political affiliation, would be proud to see.
And then just one more quick one on the State of the Union. How much is that speech being changed by the Russia-Ukraine crisis? Can you just give us a little bit of a preview about what we may hear from the president on Tuesday?
I certainly understand the question, but I can't give you a preview of a speech 4 days from now quite yet about and how it will address a developing conflict. Go ahead.
Yeah, President Biden stated from the outset, and you've reiterated today, that he won't send U.S. troops to Ukraine to fight Russians. Given the high stakes, President Biden yesterday said Russia has aspirations beyond Ukraine. Why isn't this a fight worth sending U.S. troops for? Why, why has the president assessed that shouldn't be an option?
Well, I would say first it's important to note that we have certainly made clear, not just by words, but by actions, that we are going to continue to support and even plus up our support for NATO defense operations. And there was an announcement yesterday of an increase of additional 7,000 troops. And obviously there was a significant announcement made today by NATO. We will firmly stand behind our Article 5 obligations. But I would say, as it relates to sending U.S. troops into Ukraine, the role of the President of the United States, any president, is to make an assessment about what is in the interest of the United States, our national security interests, the American people, and certainly weigh very heavily how we're leading the global community. But it is not in our interest to be in a war with Russia. And so, no, we are not sending U.S. troops to Ukraine.
But by stating up front that this is not an option, didn't President Biden take away what could have been a threat to deter Putin from invading and to further push into Ukraine?
I think the president believes he has a responsibility to be very direct with the American people about what his intentions are and what his intentions are not. And that is his first priority as president.
And finally, what was the White House's reaction to President Zelensky's today in a video address saying that Ukraine has, quote, been left alone to defend itself against Russia?
Well, as you know, the president spoke with President Zelensky and made clear to him during that conversation that he commended his brave leadership, his brave actions, the brave actions of the Ukrainian people who are fighting to defend their country. He also conveyed our ongoing economic, humanitarian, and security support that we will continue to provide. So that is hardly standing on the sidelines. We are providing, again, the largest provider of security, economic, humanitarian assistance of any country in the world, and we will continue to support President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people.
So the White House doesn't think he's been left alone?
I think I'll leave it at that. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Jen. Does the administration have any plans to offer TPS to Ukrainians who are in the United States or who might end up coming to the United States? Does it support the idea?
Well, it's a process that would be overseen by the interagency, go through an interagency process led by the Department of Homeland Security. I know there are many advocates for that, but I don't have an update on the process or if it will happen.
What plans does the administration, in regard to refugees, what plans does the administration have to take in, for the United States, to take in some refugees in the United States? Have there been any planning discussions, perhaps with refugee groups, to prepare this? Do you have an anticipated number of how many refugees may come to the United States?
I don't have an anticipated number to project. What I will convey to you is that we are always in constant contact with the refugee organizations who do incredible work around the world. But I would also reiterate that what we've seen happen over the last couple of days is countries like Poland, Germany, and others in Europe make clear that they are opening their arms to welcome refugees from Ukraine. Those are neighboring countries, so we do anticipate the vast majority will want to go to countries in Europe.
But you do anticipate that some would come to the United States?
We are open to that, yes.
And if I could ask one more. Senator Coons floated the idea of a $10 billion emergency supplemental package. Does the administration support that proposal?
We are having ongoing conversations with Congress about additional assistance to Ukraine. Our OMB leadership is having those conversations, and so I will leave it to them to put out any updated specific number from our end, but those are underway. Go ahead.
Why doesn't President Biden want to talk to Vladimir Putin right now?
Because he's invading a sovereign country.
Isn't he going to be potentially invading that for years on end?
Well, I would say that a moment where a leader is beginning and in the middle of invading a sovereign country is not the moment where diplomacy feels appropriate. It does not mean we have ruled out diplomacy forever. Obviously, the president remains open to engaging at a leader-to-leader level, but this is not the moment.
And why are you guys waiting to apply maximum pressure on Russia with, sanctions on everything? It doesn't seem, are you guys waiting for Kiev to fall or
sanctions on everything? How do you mean?
Like sanctions on all Russian transactions and oil and gas, or like, do you think that Americans are not willing to take a hit at the gas pump?
Well, I would say there's a couple of principles through which the president has approached sanctions. One is maximizing the impact on Russian leadership and on the Russian financial system, so that there will be a particular squeeze. We've obviously taken steps already that have gone far and above what has ever been done in the past. If you look at just the 10 financial institutions that we sanctioned, they hold a huge percentage of, they're about 80% of the Russian banking sector. That is a significant step that was announced yesterday. The export controls step that was announced yesterday means that they won't have the ability to get access to the technology and semiconductors and AI that President Putin desperately wants to continue to innovate his economy moving forward. There's also, of course, European countries are also looking at some of their reliance on Russia, whether it's for energy or other purposes, and they're making their own decisions about diversifying. And as I noted a little bit earlier, the ruble remains about 10% weaker year to date and the worst performing emerging market currency in the world. So what should be clear here is that there are already huge impacts. There is already an enormous squeeze on the Russian financial system and economy. What the president is also focused on as a principle is taking steps, making sure we are minimizing the impact on the American people, on the global economic system, and we of course weigh that as we have a responsibility to do. And we want to, first and foremost, I should have said this first, take these steps united with our partners and allies in Europe.
Does the administration have any message to American companies that do business in Russia with entities that are not necessarily on the sanction list? Would you like to see U.S. citizens not buy Russian products? Would you like to see U.S.-based CEOs not look for business in Russia?
We're not trying to hurt the people of Russia or the Russian people. We're trying to squeeze the financial system and sector to make sure there are significant consequences for the actions of the president. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. So understanding there's no plans for Presidents Biden and Putin to speak, is there any line of communication between the White House and the Kremlin right now?
I don't have additional details on that at this point in time. Obviously, our national security team has a range of means of communicating with the Russians.
And should we take what you said earlier in your answer to mean that the president won't speak with Putin unless Putin de-escalates or withdraws?
Well, again, it's not the appropriate moment right now. I'm not going to give you a forever or never, because that's not how he feels. But they are actively invading Ukraine. They are moving on the capital. They are looking to overturn leadership. This is not the moment for President Biden to have a diplomatic conversation with President Putin.
On refugees, it's been noted that the EU response to Ukrainian refugees has been quite different to the response to refugees from other nations, and I wonder what the White House view is on that, given that some countries like Poland and Hungary were actively trying to keep out many refugees, largely from the Middle East.
Well, I don't think I have any further comment on that from here about the decisions of other countries and where they accept refugees from. What I can speak to is what our approach is here in the United States. And obviously, we have welcomed with open arms tens of thousands of Afghan refugees. And certainly, while it may be, to go to the earlier question, that the majority of refugees from Ukraine go to Europe, we are certainly open to accepting refugees from Ukraine as well. That is our policy and our approach, and certainly what we will continue to implement. Go ahead.
Just following up on the question and your discussion of sanctioning oil and gas, and understanding that the president, in any decisions he makes around sanctions or any other actions he takes against Russia, is thinking about the American people. Is there a point at which he would consider doing that? Is that
like the energy sector?
Yeah, is the energy sector at some level on the table if Putin gets even more aggressive? And also, there are also some other countries that have worked for carve-outs, for instance, Italy and luxury goods. What is the U.S. view of those kinds of exceptions being made for things that are maybe a lot less essential, as much as we might like them, than oil and gas?
Speaking for yourself. So I would say in the energy sector, no option is off the table. But again, to go back to some of the principles here, our sanctions are designed to harm Russia's economy, not our economy. And that's a key balance that we're clearly trying to strike. And I think when Dilip has been in here a few times over the last week, he's conveyed we do risk assessments, right? And impact assessments. And that's a part of it. The other factor here on the energy sector is that starting out with energy could actually benefit President Putin and pad his pockets, because given high oil and gas prices, cutting off Russian oil and gas could drive prices up to Putin's benefit. So that's obviously a factor as well, but it's not off the table, but we look at a range of issues.
In terms of what other countries have fought as far as carve out or areas that they're not sanctioning, does the administration have a view of that?
I don't think, I think, look, our focus right now is that we are working in close coordination and in lockstep with our European counterparts. It does not mean everything is identical. It is not identical. But what you have seen across the board is very strong, impactful sanctions that the shared hope is that they will have significant economic and financial consequences.
Does the administration have an estimate of how many Russian deaths or casualties there have been in Ukraine at this point?
I don't have that assessment from here. I don't expect we would have that assessment from here.
Ukrainians have this number 3,800 that they've been putting out, or 2,800 that they've been putting out today. Do you have any sense of the accuracy or the order of magnitude?
I don't have any assessment from here, and I don't anticipate we would. I know that the Department of Defense is doing regular or daily, nearly, briefings on kind of the movements and what they're seeing on the ground, but I don't believe even they were able to make an assessment of casualties earlier today.
One more quick question on the Supreme Court process. You mentioned 3 candidates that he interviewed in person. Just want to make sure, that's the only 3 candidates he interviewed in person? Did he interview any candidates virtually?
Those are the candidates he interviewed.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead. Did you have another one?
No.
Okay.
No.
Go ahead. Go.
So much, Jen. Thank you. Jen, does the White House stand by the support you guys gave to Brazil to become a global partner and NATO after President Bolsonaro met last week with President Putin, and still President Bolsonaro didn't condemn the invasion?
Again, as I said in relation to a question a little bit earlier, I mean, our view and our push for every country in the world is to stand up in this moment and decide where you stand, where you want to be in history, as the history books look back. But that doesn't, I don't have anything in terms of our change of our view of our overarching relationship. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I just follow up on that question in terms of building a global coalition against Russia, right? I mean, India, for example, a Quad member, it's the only Quad member that's not implementing export controls, for example. I think the president yesterday mentioned that that issue still hasn't been resolved. Is he planning to call Prime Minister Modi? I think Prime Minister Modi called President Putin yesterday. And just can you speak more broadly in terms of bringing all these other partners that maybe, not in Europe, but, the Quad, as well as perhaps ASEAN members who are pretty ambivalent and cautious about condemning the Russian invasion?
I would say some were, but I wouldn't say the majority were. And we continue to engage with the Indians, with other ASEAN partners on both what we're seeing on the ground, our continued condemnation of the actions of President Putin in Ukraine, and we will continue to push others to follow suit.
And just to follow up, Delta announced today that they're suspending code sharing with Aeroflot. Did the White House have anything to do with this decision? And are you urging other American companies to urge them to do the same?
That's a decision by a private sector company, so I don't have any more comment
on
on
the
it.
State of the Union, Jen, can you preview a little bit on the foreign policy portion of the President's State of the Union? I mean, obviously with the crisis in Ukraine, I know that you're not going to be able to preview that. But just in general, now with Ukraine, before that with the Afghanistan withdrawal, what can the President say to show that his foreign policy doctrine is succeeding?
Well, without previewing the State of the Union, which we'll do later this evening or later this weekend. Sorry, it's kind of all one day that's running together. We will do later this weekend, I expect. So look ahead to that, or we'll have more to say later this weekend. It's also as it relates to Russia, Ukraine. We are unfortunately still in the middle of this conflict, right? We are in the middle of an active invasion. So I just can't give you a preview of what that will look like in the State of the Union. As it relates to how the president views his approach to foreign policy, the president has ran for president wanting to return America's seat at the world, wanting to return to a time where other leaders around the world could trust the word and the commitments of the United States. And what you have seen over the last few months is the president deliver on exactly that. He has been leading the effort in the world to stand up to Russia, stand up to the efforts, the aggression, the invasion of a sovereign country. Well, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what is going to be in the State of the Union, that's exactly what he said he would do when he was running. Go ahead.
So the president said he's doing everything he can to bring down energy prices, gas prices here in the U.S. Is on the table then, or is he considering reversing some of the policies and regulations that they put into place that constricts the long-term supply of it to let Europe be more reliant on the U.S. for oil and natural gas?
You mean like LNG exports or something like that?
But also oil prices, allowing, opening up drilling again, reversing the ban on leases on federal lands?
Well, I think what's important to note here, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, is that there are a range of available oil leasing sites that oil companies are not utilizing. So you should ask them about that. You know the president's view on reducing our dependence on foreign oil, and actually his view is that this makes that case even stronger, and diversifying the range of means of energy production everywhere around the world. As it relates to LNG exports, I don't have anything new on that. Our focus right now is on working with or engaging with a range of countries. I mentioned Japan yesterday, having conversations with others who may have the availability of supply, natural gas supply, that was coming from the United States to provide to Europe in this time where they need it. And we're seeing some encouraging developments on that front.
One more thing on OPEC. OPEC is making moves now to get ready to include Iranian oil if the U.S. is successful with the Iran nuclear deal. Would the president then welcome Iranian oil coming into the U.S. to lower gas prices?
Well, again, we're not quite at the point of a final deal on the nuclear deal, so we will talk about that if we get to that point. Let's see. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. You've talked a couple times about the U.S. engaging in diplomacy with Russia going forward. When he announced the sanctions today against Putin and Lavrov, the British Prime Minister told NATO leaders that there could be no normalization with Russia after the attack on Ukraine. Does this administration share that view?
Well, again, in this moment, I've conveyed pretty clearly the president has no intentions at this moment to engage with President Putin. He was just sanctioned. We just made a decision in coordination, in close lockstep with the Europeans, to sanction him ahead of state. That is a very rare step to take. And obviously, we've issued significant sanctions that cover 80% of the financial sector. So, no, we're not in a business as usual moment at this point in time. And obviously, de-escalation would help return us to a state where that could proceed.
Does the White House right now believe that President Zelensky is safe in Kyiv?
We are in close touch with him. Well, I'm not going to give you updates on his security state. Certainly, the president just spoke with him earlier today, and he continues to be the president of Ukraine. Go ahead.
Hi, in regards to the new CDC guidance on the pandemic, which of course will then be the new Biden administration guidance, what will the message be to Americans in regards to these new metrics and the new guidance as to where we are in the pandemic?
Well, I would say if you look at the specific of them, we are moving. The president, we've talked a little bit about how we want to move to a time and a place where we are, have the tools needed so that COVID and the pandemic did not disrupt our daily lives. Obviously, there's more. The president's been talking to his COVID team about exactly that. This is a part of that process, and we're moving forward in that process. As a result of this announcement today and these updated recommendations, today more than half the country, 70% of Americans, live in areas where the CDC no longer recommends universal masking. Obviously, if people want to wear a mask because they're immunocompromised, because they have concerns about their safety in their communities, they should have the ability to do that. But that is certainly a step forward. So, this is part of that process, and I expect we'll have more to say soon.
Is there concern that this might imply or have folks think that then, therefore, the pandemic is over and can issue all caution? And then secondly, or kind of added on to that, are you confident that there will be an ability to reverse course if things get bad again?
Well, if nobody is saying it means it's over, including anybody who has a big platform, for example, then we're not concerned about that. That is not what we're conveying from here, right? What we are conveying from here and what the CDC is conveying is that America is in a stronger place today as a nation. We have more tools than ever before to protect ourselves from COVID-19, vaccination, boosters, treatments, testing, high-quality masks, improved ventilation. Over 200 million people are vaccinated. Nearly 100 million Americans have been boosted. And the CDC is providing public health guidance that has a couple of different clear levels so that people can understand what their recommendation is as it relates to wearing a mask. That's exactly what this is. There are still people dying every day of COVID. There are still immunocompromised populations. But what we are trying to work towards is a period of time where where COVID is not disrupting our daily lives. Go ahead.
Just wanted to know, you said that the president has done everything in his power. We've seen the sanctions, shoring up the NATO eastern flank, all of that, but no troops. You repeated that. Doesn't that also send the message to Vladimir Putin, clearly it hasn't stopped him, that other nations in the region that are not NATO members are also free game for him, since he's not going to have that stopped?
Well, I don't think the crippling sanctions that the president has issued or approved, and we announced yesterday, that cover 80% of the financial sector, that are having an impact already on the financial sector there, or steps that the president has taken, including banning export controls, or steps he's taken to sanction oligarchs and to rally the world to take not only significant financial steps, but also to treat President Putin as a pariah, send a message that there's a free walk for anything. In fact, President Putin is isolating himself further. If his objective here is to, as his stated objective is to divide NATO, if his stated objective is to divide the West, it's having the opposite effect. So I don't think that would be our assessment.
But
Go ahead.
Can I just a quick question on cyber attacks?
Yeah.
The NATO Secretary General again said that he would view a cyber attack on a NATO member, this time talking about NATO members, as something that would be under Article 5. Is that the view of the United States also, that a cyber attack?
Yeah, I answered this yesterday, and I said that it would be up to NATO members to determine what that looks like and what any response would look like. Go ahead.
Has the president been in touch with, before or after the decision today, with Congressman Clyburn? He, of course, was a big booster.
Yeah, he called him this morning.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, one more, last one.
Thank you, Jen.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Thank you, Jen. You've said that the U.S. will not go to war against Russia. Obviously, Russia is heavily armed, the U.S. is heavily armed, and I'm just wondering if you're not being pragmatic here with Russia. Have you not been pragmatic to recognize that it may not be in the interest of the U.S. for Ukraine to be a member of NATO, which is the key request from Russia?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question. Are you asking me if...
In the interest of the U.S. for Ukraine to be a member of NATO?
It is up to every country to determine what alliances they want to join or not join, and that is not a pressure point we issue from the United States, and we think it's important for that to remain open.
That you are looking for a job at CNN or MSNBC?
I have more than enough on my plate here, and so you can't get rid of me quite yet. Sorry, Peter, for you on that. And so I will see you all on Monday. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1,
First, we will be imposing sanctions on President Putin and his fellow architects of this barbaric war, his chief of staff and foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. These men bear the greatest responsibility for the death and destruction occurring in Ukraine. Additionally, I am confirming Canada's support to remove Russia from the SWIFT payment system, a critical part of the global banking system. We've made it clear that all options are on the table when it comes to imposing steep costs on Russia's unjustified and unprovoked invasion, and that includes taking steps to exclude Russia from making financial transactions around the world. Excluding Russian banks from SWIFT would make it even more difficult for President Putin to finance his brutalities. Canada is also announcing that we will levy additional sanctions on Belarus and its leaders for abetting President Putin's invasion of a free and sovereign nation. These will target 57 individuals and are in addition to the dozens of existing strong sanctions already leveled against Alexander Lukashenko's regime for their repeated, systematic human rights violations and decades of oppression of their own people. Aujourd'hui, le Canada annonce une troisième série de sanctions concertées. Ces sanctions visent le président Poutine, son chef de cabinet, ainsi que son ministre des Affaires étrangères, Sergei Lavrov. Elles visent aussi le régime du Bélarus, qui a facilité cette invasion. De plus, on annonce également que le Canada appuie fortement le retrait de la Russie du réseau bancaire SWIFT. Le coût humain de cette crise est énorme. Le monde est témoin des scènes tragiques de bombardements et de déplacements massifs. Le président Poutine provoque une crise de réfugiés en Europe. Je sais qu'il est dans la nature des Canadiens de vouloir aider. Les Canadiens sont toujours prêts à faire leur part et à être généreux pour les gens les plus vulnérables. Alors aujourd'hui, on annonce que notre gouvernement va donner une somme équivalente pour chaque dollar donné à la Croix-Rouge canadienne en réponse à la crise humanitaire en Ukraine, jusqu'à concurrence de 10 millions de dollars. Today, we are announcing that our government will match every donation you make to the Canadian Red Cross Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Appeal up to $10 million. This money will go directly to supporting relief efforts in the region. This is in addition to the $50 million for development humanitarian aid previously announced and the $620 million in sovereign loans we have made available to Ukraine's government. On a more personal note, let me just say that I've had the pleasure of getting to know Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, quite well over the past number of years. Like I told him when we spoke yesterday, I am inspired by his resolve and his devotion to his country. He is the embodiment of the courage of Ukrainian people, and just like him, Ukrainian people are showing incredible strength and resilience. President Putin's war on Ukraine is a war on freedom, on democracy, and on the rights of Ukrainians and all people to determine their own future. President Putin has opened the darkest chapter yet in his assault on the Ukrainian people, but he has made a grave miscalculation. People around the world, including in the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg, are standing against his brutal and unnecessary war. They are standing with Ukraine, as are all of us. Canada, and increasingly the world, stand united and unwavering in our support of Ukraine. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll turn to questions now. I'm hopeful to get two in the room and at least one on the phone, and we'll start with Madeleine Blais-Morin, Radio-Canada, et then, I believe, Rachel Haynes, CTV. Madeleine.
Monsieur Trudeau, le premier ministre Ford a dit qu'il fallait accélérer l'accueil de réfugiés en disant qu'il y aurait au moins 20 000 emplois disponibles pour eux. Le gouvernement Legault a dit qu'il était prêt à ouvrir ses bras aussi aux réfugiés. Avez-vous une cible chiffrée d'accueil de réfugiés ukrainiens et un plan pour l'atteindre?
Ça fait plusieurs semaines que malheureusement on se prépare pour cette éventualité qu'on espérait ne jamais arriver, mais ça faisait partie de ces préparations de s'assurer qu'on puisse accélérer le traitement de demandes de réfugiés, de demandes d'immigration, d'extension de visas pour les Ukrainiens couramment ici au Canada. Mais effectivement, on est prêt à en faire beaucoup plus et sur ça, je suis content de passer la parole à mon collègue, le ministre de l'Immigration, Sean Fraser, pour une réponse. Sean?
Thank you, and let me begin by adding my voice to the Prime Minister's remarks and condemning the egregious behavior of Vladimir Putin on this unnecessary war of aggression. The thought that someone would be so callous as to erode the self-determination of another sovereign nation and its people is beyond comprehension. As the Prime Minister said, we've been preparing for weeks. Since January 19th, we have been launching our operational readiness. We started by beefing up resources in our Warsaw, Vienna, Bucharest offices and preparing London for an influx of additional digital applications.
To crush a neighboring state. This is happening in the very heart of our continent, Europe. The Secretary General has been crystal clear. This is contrary to all UN principles. Russia is trampling on the UN Charter. France and the European Union stand in full solidarity and support of Ukraine. We already have adopted strong measures to make sure that all this comes to a heavy price for Russia. Russia has to stop its war. This is why today in the Security Council we are voting on a resolution to stop this aggression. Each member of the Security Council will have to make a choice and take a responsibility. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, what's the purpose of putting this resolution to the Council if you know the Russians will veto it? Are you going to General Assembly after this?
The agenda is still being negotiated.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We've all been watching with horror the unfolding situation in Ukraine. These are truly shocking events, and the Council has a responsibility to act. This is its mandate, and we in Ireland take that very seriously. So we'll be going in shortly to discuss a resolution that will denounce Russia's flagrant violations of international law and the United Nations Charter as well. Everyone is going to have to say in that chamber where they stand on these events and what has happened in the past few days. When I cast Ireland's vote in the chamber, I'll be casting it in solidarity with the people of Ukraine whose lives are threatened by Russian aggression.
Ambassador, we all know Russia will veto this resolution, so what's the purpose of bringing this resolution to the Security Council? And after it gets vetoed here, are you going to General Assembly?
Well, as I've said, the Council has a responsibility for international peace and security, and people need to say where they stand. So that's what we'll be doing today. In terms of next steps, the veto may prevent a passage of a resolution, but it will not hinder the international community's work in holding Russia to account for these events, and we'll be consulting with partners on next steps.
Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you later. Thank you.
No, that's what I'm saying, but everyone keeps telling me to go like this. Everyone keeps telling me go under. That's what everyone keeps telling me.
I was thinking of the like his like level with his mouth.
8979 заседание Совета Безопасности объявляется
The 8,979th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda of the meeting for today is letter from the permanent representative of Ukraine to the United Nations, dated 28 February 2014, addressed to the President of the Security Council, S/2014/136. The agenda is adopted. On the basis of Rule 37 of the Provisional Rules of Procedure of the Security Council, I invite the representatives of Australia, Austria, Andorra, Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, Belgium, Bulgaria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Botswana, Hungary, Guatemala, Germany, Greece, Georgia, Denmark, Dominican Republic, Iceland, Spain, Italy, Canada, Cyprus, Colombia, Costa Rica, Kuwait, Latvia, Liberia, Lithuania, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Malta, Niger, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Poland, Portugal, the Federal States of Micronesia, the Republic of Moldova, the Republic of Korea, Romania, Samoa, Singapore, Slovakia, Slovenia, Timor-Leste, Trinidad and Tobago, Turkey, Ukraine, Fiji, Finland, Montenegro, the Czech Republic, Chile, Switzerland, Sweden, and Ecuador to participate in today's meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Council members have before them document S/2022/155, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Australia, Austria, Albania, Andorra, Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Belize, Belgium, Bulgaria, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Botswana, Hungary, Guatemala, Germany, Greece, Georgia, Denmark, the Dominican Republic, Ireland, Iceland, Spain, Italy, Canada, Cyprus, Colombia, Costa Rica, Kuwait, Latvia, Liberia, Lithuania, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Malta, Niger, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Poland, Portugal, the Federal States of Micronesia, the Republic of Moldova, the Republic of Korea, Romania, Samoa, Singapore, Slovakia, Slovenia, the United Kingdom of the United Kingdom and North Ireland, the United States of America, Timor-Leste, Trinidad and Tobago, Turkey, Ukraine, Fiji, Finland, France, Montenegro, the Czech Republic, Chile, Switzerland, Sweden, and Ecuador. The Security Council is ready to undertake a vote on the draft resolution before it. I now give the floor to those members of the Security Council who wish to deliver statements before the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Colleagues, we are here today because of Russia's unprovoked, unjustified, unconscionable war on Ukraine. Let us never forget that this is a war of choice, Russia's choice. Russia chose to invade its neighbor. Russia chose to inflict untold suffering on the Ukrainian people and on its own citizens. Russia chose to violate Ukraine's sovereignty, to violate international law, to violate the UN Charter. Now, all across Ukraine, people are fleeing for their lives. Residents of Kyiv and Kharkiv have left their homes with only the belongings they could stuff in their backpacks to make shelter in subway stations, which have now become bomb shelters. We've seen reports of attacks on kindergartens and orphanages. Babies, newborn babies in an intensive care unit have been evacuated into makeshift bomb shelters too. We have seen heart-wrenching images of fathers sobbing as they say goodbye to their young children and sending their families away, as they send their families away to safety while they stay behind to defend their country. In Kyiv today, thousands of people crushed into a local train station with mothers passing their children over the crowd, begging for people to help to get their babies onto trains and to safety. According to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, more than 50,000 people have fled Ukraine in less than 48 hours. We've also seen everyday Russians bravely speak out and demonstrate in cities across Russia against President Putin's decision to plunge them into a war with their neighbor. They do not want to sacrifice Russian lives for Putin's ambition. This body, charged with maintaining international peace and security, was created to prevent exactly this kind of aggression from ever happening again. Russia's latest attack on our most fundamental principles is so bold, so brazen, that it threatens our international system as we know it. We have a solemn obligation to not look away. We believe to our core that the noble intentions of this institution should still have a place in solving 21st century problems and shielding our children and our grandchildren from the horrors of war. The horrors of war are exactly what our Ukrainian brothers and sisters are experiencing today. The people of Ukraine will soon need food and water and shelter and medical aid. They will face displacement and lose everything they've worked to build. For these reasons, we and Albania, in consultation with our allies and partners, have proposed this draft resolution holding Russia to account for its aggression against Ukraine. This resolution condemns Russia's aggression. It reaffirms the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And it demands the Russian Federation to immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw its forces. It also calls for the facilitation of rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian assistance to those in need in Ukraine and the protection of civilians, including those who are humanitarian personnel. Today, we are taking a principled stand against Russia's aggression in this council, but many of us are taking actions in our capitals to defend international law, including the UN Charter, and to impose severe consequences on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. In coordination with our allies and partners, we are imposing severe and immediate economic costs on Russia. These measures include sweeping financial sanctions that will have an immediate impact on its economy and export controls that will cut off Russia's access to vital technological inputs, atrophy its industrial base, and undercut Russia's strategic ambitions to exert influence on the world stage. In addition, President Biden will be sanctioning President Putin himself, along with Foreign Minister Lavrov and members of Russia's national security team. These actions are meant to complement the important work we're doing in the Security Council and the resolution we have put forward today. History will judge us for our actions or lack thereof. And so long as we have a Security Council, I believe we ought to strive to ensure it lives up to the highest purposes to prevent conflict and avert unnecessary war. Russia has already subverted that mission, but at a minimum, at the very minimum, the rest of us have an obligation to object and to stand up for the UN Charter. To those who say all parties are culpable, I say that is a clear cop-out. One country is invading another. Russia is the aggressor here. There is no middle ground. Any doubters, I say, look at the kindergarten that was bombed this morning. Take a hard look. To those who say there is a special history between Russia and Ukraine that somehow excuses the war, I say we should all think carefully who that label might apply to next. And as I said on Monday night, President Putin asserted that Russia has a rightful claim to all territories from the Russian Empire. And just a few hours ago, Russia threatened Finland and Sweden with military and political repercussions. Responsible member states do not invade their neighbors. They do not commit violence against their neighbors just because they have the ability to do so. That is the entire purpose of our international system. That is fundamentally the point of the Security Council and the United Nations. So, colleagues, this is a simple vote today. Let me put it plainly. Vote yes if you believe in upholding the UN Charter. Vote yes if you support Ukraine's or any state's right to sovereignty and territorial integrity. Vote yes if you believe Russia should be held to account for its actions. Vote no or abstain if you do not uphold the Charter and align yourselves with the aggressive and unprovoked actions of Russia. Just as Russia had a choice, so do you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Let me start by stating that my delegation subscribes to what we just heard from the Ambassador of the United States. Dear colleagues, we are called today to express clearly and loudly where we, our states, stand individually and collectively with respect to international law that we have agreed to, with the principles enshrined in the UN Charter that we have agreed to, with the international norms we have commonly established to govern our relations as independent and sovereign countries, as peace-loving nations, as responsible international actors. As we speak, Ukraine is being bombed, people are being killed, a country in Europe is being destroyed by a more powerful country, its neighbor, that has decided it wants to turn the historic clock backwards. A prominent member of the Security Council to whom the world has given power and trust to decide on peace and security. Instead, that country has decided to rule and inflict death. With its unprovoked aggression, Russia is not only inflicting untold pain and causing an unprecedented humanitarian situation in Europe, it has stained the UN Charter with innocent blood. It is burying the Charter under the rubble of destruction in Kiev and other cities in Ukraine. We must say no, and it is not too late to stop this madness. Dear colleagues, the resolution that Albania and the United States, together with many partners, have presented condemns Russia's actions, underscores that Russia must immediately cease its use of force against Ukraine and withdraw its forces. It calls upon Russia to abide by the Minsk agreements. It also calls for facilitation of humanitarian assistance to those in need in Ukraine, and their number is growing by the hour, and urges continuous efforts to respond to the humanitarian and refugee crisis that Russia's aggression has created. The resolution echoes the call of the Secretary General addressed publicly to President Putin that in the name of humanity, bring your troops back to Russia. It echoes numerous similar calls at the highest level around the globe to stop war. This is the minimum we can do. We owe it to Ukraine, a member of the United Nations, to its people, to the world. Dear colleagues, this is a defining moment for the Council, and not only. This is a day that will be long remembered on one single aspect, and our children, the future generations, will know who stood up for respect of human life, for international law, for rules, for solidarity with Ukraine, so that children, young girls, women and men, just human beings, live their life free, in peace and in dignity. And who did not. This is not a moment to look away. This is a moment to speak, and we call on the members of the Council to support the text so that we say no to aggression, we say no to an unprovoked war, we say no to the domination of a country by a more powerful one. And I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you. The UN Charter begins with a solemn invocation to peace. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save successive generations from the scourge of war. That conviction has been the touchstone of the work in this chamber since 1945. We must not forget that our fundamental purpose here is to protect people and their futures, to protect people from violence and conflict that destroys lives. As we speak, women and children in Kyiv, young families in Odessa, pensioners in Kharkiv, and civilians all over Ukraine are sheltering from Russia's military onslaught. First, Russia claimed this was all Western hysteria. Then they said it was about Donetsk and Luhansk. Now they are bombing Kiev. We have seen dreadful images of Russian tanks crushing civilians in the Ukrainian capital. A country of 44 million people is being attacked on all fronts. Colleagues, the resolution we are voting on today is a message to those people that the world is on your side and stands with the Ukrainian people. It's a message to the world that the rules we built together must be defended, because otherwise, who might be next? It's a message to Russia as well, to the brave Russian citizens who are protesting a war they do not want. This resolution demands an end to this war. Colleagues, President Putin has launched a massive invasion of Ukraine. His aim is to remove its government and subjugate its people. No fog of war is thick enough to obscure a truth this clear. This is not self-defence under Article 51. It is naked aggression. It is an unprovoked, unjustified war, and this Council must condemn it. Thank you.
Спасибо. Сейчас я предоставляю слово представителю Габона.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
ce Conseil
the
se trouve
Security Council
aujourd'hui
today finds itself
face à ses responsabilités
facing face to face with
dans
its
sa
responsibility
capacité de
in
réaffirmer
its
les
capacity to
principes fondamentaux
reaffirm
qui
the
sous-tendent
core
son
principles
existence.
which undergird its very
Les
existence.
Nations Unies
The
ont
United
été créées au
Nations
sortir d'une guerre
was
sanglante,
created on the ashes
dans
of a
l'objectif
brutal war,
principal
the main
de
aim
prévenir
of which
et
is
d'empêcher
to prevent
toute autre
any
belligérance
other
meurtrière.
deadly act of belligerence.
Aujourd'hui,
Today,
alors que plusieurs
at a time
nations et
when
peuples
a number
du
of
monde
nations
peinent
and peoples
encore
throughout
à
the world
exorciser les stigmates
continue
des
to
guerres
attempt
lointaines,
to heal the scars of
pendant que l'humanité cherche
faraway
des réponses
wars as
concrètes
humanity
contre les
seeks
vulnérabilités
concrete
et
responses
fragilités
to
multiples qui le
vulnerability
menacent,
and the manifold
nous
fragilities
n'avons
which
pas
threaten
besoin
it,
ni de guerre,
we need
ni de
neither
nouvelles peurs.
wars nor any new sources
La
of
guerre est la
fear.
négation
War
des aspirations
is
des
the
peuples du monde.
very denial of the
La
aspirations
guerre
of people
sème la
throughout
mort
the
et la
world.
destruction.
War wreaks death
Ces
and
dévastations et
destruction. The
traumatismes
devastation of
sont
war and the
terribles
traumas
et
of
souvent
war
irréparables.
are devastating
La
and
guerre n'a jamais de
frequently
réel vainqueur,
irreparable. There is no winner
mais
ever
ravive
in war.
l'atrocité des
War
douleurs
merely
en rendant chronique
revives
le
the
cycle
pain
infernal
and
des
making
rancœurs.
the hellish cycles
collègues,
of resentment all the more
parce que mon pays
infernal.
est attaché
My
à la paix
country is wedded to
et
peace.
aux principes qui
We are
fondent la
wedded
Charte
to
des
the
Nations Unies.
principles underpinning the Charter of
Parce
the
que mon
United
pays
Nations.
milite pour un ordre
We
international
we champion
plus
an
juste,
international order
fondé
that
sur
is
les règles.
fairer, a
Il
rules-based
va condamner
order. For this reason,
aujourd'hui
today
la guerre
we condemn
contre un
the
membre
war
des
against
États
a
des Nations Unies.
member of the United Nations.
Mon pays joindra sa
My
voix à
country
toutes celles
joins
qui
its
aujourd'hui
voice to all of those
condamneront
who
la
today
guerre
will condemn
avec l'espoir
war with the
que
ardent
notre élan
hope
de réaffirmation
that
des principes de la Charte des Nations
will
Unies
reaffirm the
ne sera
principles
plus
of the
jamais
United Nations
à
and
géométrie
that this
variable
will never
et que les
be
principes
carried
sur
out in
lesquels
different
se
ways
fonde
in
notre
different
position
areas and the
aujourd'hui
principles
seront toujours
underpinning our
défendus
position
avec la même force
are
et la même
equally
vigueur partout où ils auront
upheld
à être
in-
bafoués.
for all.
Chers collègues,
Distinguished colleagues,
la communauté internationale
the
se
international
doit de saisir ce
community
momentum
is
pour
called
une
upon to
autocritique sans
seize this
concession
momentum
et s'interdire
for frank
partout dans le monde
self-criticism so as
toute
to
guerre
ensure
de
that
choix,
throughout the world any
toute guerre
war of
d'influence,
choice, any war of
toute guerre
influence,
d'hégémonie,
any war of
toute guerre de
hegemony,
prédation de
any
ressources,
war
toute guerre injuste
for looting over
et
of resources,
déshumanisante.
any war, all wars
La
are
scène internationale
dehumanizing. The
ne doit pas
international
refléter
stage
l'image d'une
should
jungle
not be
dans
reflection
laquelle
of a
les nations
jungle
sont
where
soit chasseurs,
where
soit chassés.
nations are either either
Monsieur le
predators
Président,
or prey. Mr.
pour terminer,
President, to conclude,
nous voulons
we
réitérer
wish
notre
to
appel à un
reiterate
cessez-le-feu
our call
immédiat
for an immediate
et à la désescalade.
ceasefire, for
Nous demandons aux
de-escalation.
belligérants de ne
We
pas entraver
beseech
l'accès
the belligerents
de l'aide
not
humanitaire
to
aux populations
hinder access
qui en ont
of
besoin.
humanitarian assistance to those
Nous
people
appelons
who are in
l'ensemble des
need.
partis
We
à
call
renouer le
upon
fil
all
du dialogue
parties
et à
to
privilégier le
revitalize
règlement
dialogue,
pacifique
to
de
embrace
leurs
a
différends.
peaceful settlement to
Quant
their
à nous, chers
disputes.
collègues,
As
membres
for
du
us,
Conseil de
distinguished
sécurité,
colleagues, members of the Security
les
Council,
responsabilités que nous avons à prendre aujourd'hui et chaque fois doivent se traduire par la défense, la réaffirmation et le renouvellement de nos engagements souscrits il y a 77 ans, ceux de préserver les générations présentes et futures du fléau de la guerre. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
from the scourge of war. Thank you,
Спасибо.
Mr.
Сейчас я
President.
предоставляю слово
Thank you,
представителю
and I give the
Мексики.
floor to the representative of Mexico.
Muchas gracias, señor
Thank you very
presidente.
much, President.
México votará en
Mexico
favor del
will
proyecto
vote
de
in favor
resolución
of the draft resolution
presentado por
presented
Albania y
by
los Estados
Albania and the
Unidos
United States,
por las razones que
and
expondré
we will do
a
so for the
continuación.
following reasons.
Primero,
First,
Estamos ante la invasión
We
de
are
un país
witnessing
soberano
one country's invasion
por parte de
of a
otro,
sovereign country.
lo que representa una
This
flagrante
is a
violación
blatant violation
al artículo 2,
of Article 2,
párrafo 4
paragraph 4
de la Carta de la
of
ONU
the United Nations
y
Charter,
constituye,
and
además,
it is also
una
an
agresión
aggression
en los términos
under the terms
de la resolución
of General Assembly
3314 de la
Resolution
Asamblea General
3314,
adoptada
which
por
was adopted
todos
by
los
all
miembros
members
de las
of the
Naciones
United
Unidas.
Nations.
Segundo,
Secondly,
México ha sufrido en carne
Mexico
propia
has itself
4
suffered
invasiones
4 invasions
a lo largo de su
over the
historia
course of
como
its
Estado
history as an
independiente.
independent state.
2 por parte de Francia
2 by France
y 2 por parte
and
de los
2
Estados
by the
Unidos.
United States.
La primera intervención de
The
los
first
Estados Unidos
intervention
en
by the United States
1846
in
derivó en la pérdida
1846
de
led to the
casi la
loss of
mitad de
almost
nuestro
half
territorio
of our national
nacional
territory
de entonces.
at that time.
Tercero,
Thirdly,
México ha condenado
Mexico
siempre
has always
todo
condemned
acto de agresión,
all acts of aggression,
como dejó constancia
as it made
con su
clear
protesta
with its
en la
protests
Sociedad de
at the
Naciones
League of Nations,
por la anexión
at
de
the
Etiopía y
annexation
Albania
of
por
Ethiopia and
parte de
Albania
Italia
by Italy,
y la anexión de
and the
Austria
annexation
por
of
parte de
Austria
Alemania.
by Germany.
Cuarto,
Fourthly,
nuestro repudio al uso de la
our
fuerza
rejection of
nos
the
llevó
use
a
of
convocar
force
en
led us in
1945
1945
la
to convene
Conferencia
the
Interamericana sobre
Inter-American
los Problemas de
Conference
la Paz
on
y
the
de la Guerra
Problems
en la
of
Ciudad
Peace
de
and
México
War in
para llegar a
Mexico
la
City,
Conferencia de San Francisco
which then
con
led
una
on to
posición
the
regional
are going to the
clara
San
y
Francisco
definida
Conference with
en
a
torno a
clearly
este
defined
tema.
regional position on this
Quinto,
matter.
la política
5.
exterior de México
Mexico's
es
foreign policy
pacifista.
is
Desde que se
in
fundó la
favor
ONU,
of peace.
mi país ha defendido
Since the UN was
y defenderá
established, my country
ante
has
esta
defended
organización
and will
y en
defend
todos
before
los
this
foros
organization and
la
indeed in all
proscripción de la
fora
amenaza
the
o el
prohibition
uso
of
de
the
la fuerza
threat or
en las
use of
relaciones
force in
internacionales.
international relations.
Sexto,
Six,
en
in
1988
1988,
inscribimos en nuestra
we signed
Constitución
into our
los
Constitution
principios de la
the
Carta de las
principles
Naciones
of the
Unidas
United Nations
como
Charter
principios
as
normativos
normative
de
principles
nuestra
of
política
our
exterior.
foreign policy.
Por lo anteriormente expuesto,
As a result of all of the
México
above,
condena los
Mexico
actos de agresión
condemns
perpetrados por
the
la
acts of
Federación de
aggression
Rusia
perpetrated by
en
the Russian
contra de
Federation
Ucrania.
against Ukraine.
Llamamos a las
We
partes al
call
cese
on the
inmediato
parties
de
to
las
immediately
hostilidades.
cease hostilities.
Reconocemos
We
la
recognize
soberanía,
the
la
sovereignty,
independencia
political
política
independence,
y la integridad
and
territorial de
territorial
Ucrania
integrity of
y
Ukraine,
respaldamos
and we
los
support
esfuerzos del
the efforts
secretario
of the
general
UN
de la
Secretary
ONU
General
en la búsqueda
to
de una
seek
solución
a diplomatic
diplomática
solution
para evitar que avance
to
el
spare
sufrimiento de la
civilians any
población
further
civil.
suffering.
Señor presidente,
President,
como resultado
as a result
de nuestra
of
experiencia
our own
histórica
experience
y por mandato
and through a
constitucional,
constitutional mandate,
México apoyará
Mexico will
el
support
proyecto de
the
resolución
draft
que nos
resolution
ocupa.
that we are
Muchas
considering.
gracias.
Thank you.
Спасибо. Сейчас я предоставляю слово представителю Бразилии.
The representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we live in unprecedented circumstances of threat to the international order and a violation of the UN Charter. We are gravely concerned with the Russian military operations against targets in sovereign Ukrainian territory. We believe the Security Council should strive to show a united resolve in pursuing diplomatic solutions to all threats to international peace and security, and seek agreement also on the Ukrainian crisis. As we hear reports of increasing civilian casualties, fear and devastation in Ukraine, a scenario that any war inevitably generates, our main objective now is to immediately stop ongoing hostilities. How should we do that? First, the Security Council must swiftly react to the use of force against the territorial integrity of a member state. A line has been crossed, and this Council cannot remain silent. Secondly, and no less important, we need to create the conditions for dialogue among all involved parties. The world cannot afford a point of no return, where parties see military victory as the only avenue to end conflict. During the negotiations of the text, Brazil attempted to seek this balance, to maintain the space for dialogue while still signaling that the use of force against the territorial integrity of a member state is not acceptable in the world today. We are also deeply concerned with Russia's decision to engage troops in military operations on the ground and with the loss of lives and danger to the civilian population that may ensue. We continue to hold a firm conviction that threats and force will not lead this crisis to a lasting settlement. Military action will inflict damage, undermine the faith in international law, and put the lives of millions of people into jeopardy. The mission of the Security Council is not over. If our efforts have so far failed to prevent a war, it is our duty to persevere and seek the immediate suspension of hostilities. We should strive to find ways to restore peace to Ukraine and the whole region. We renew our appeal for the full cessation of hostilities, for the withdrawal of troops, and for the immediate resumption of diplomatic dialogue. There is no alternative to negotiation to solve the present crisis. The security concerns voiced by the Russian Federation in the past few years, particularly regarding the strategic balance in Europe, do not give Russia the right to threaten the territorial integrity and sovereignty of another state. The Security Council has a legitimacy to debate and, with the goodwill of all, adopt measures to redress this dangerous situation. The collective security system of the United Nations rests ultimately on the pillar of international law. The sovereign equality and the territorial integrity of UN member states are not hollow words. It is our duty to give concrete meaning to the high aspirations of the drafters of the UN Charter. That is our most valuable legacy. To rid ourselves from the scourge of war was the very reason for the establishment of the United Nations. In the end, peace and international order must prevail. We shall not rest until this mission is accomplished. I thank you, Mr. President.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Сейчас я поставлю данный проект резолюции на голосование. Прошу голосующих за проект резолюции, содержащийся в документе С-2020-155, поднять руку.
to raise their hands.
Кто против?
Those against?
Кто воздержался?
Abstentions?
Результаты
The
голосования
result of the voting is as follows.
11 голосов
11
за,
votes in favor,
1 голос
1 vote
против,
against,
3 воздержалось.
3 abstentions.
Проект резолюции
The
не
draft
принимается,
resolution
поскольку
has not
против
been
него
adopted
проголосовал постоянный
owing
член
to the negative
Совета
vote
Безопасности.
of a permanent member of the Security
Сейчас я
Council.
предоставляю
I now
слово
give the floor
тем членам
to those
Совета,
members of the
которые
Security Council
хотели бы
who
выступить
wish to deliver
с
statements
заявлениями после голосования.
after the
Я
vote.
предоставляю
I
слово
give the floor
представителю
to the
Албании.
representative of Albania.
Dear colleagues, we deeply regret the decision of the Russian Federation to veto the resolution. The Council lost a precious opportunity to show to the world its unity, its power, its usefulness. Instead, it was blocked, it was taken hostage. We are disappointed but not surprised, and this is not the end of our efforts. We will continue to work with the UN member states, with those who stand for rules and not chaos, with those who base their relations with others on respect and not contempt. We will continue to condemn this aggression, call for ending this senseless war. Russia may inflict damage, kill people, overthrow a legitimate government, try to destroy Ukraine, but as history teaches, it will never be able to kill freedom. Instead, Russia will be held responsible for the consequences of its actions. It is already facing worldwide condemnation. It will face sanctions, as we heard, and restrictions, just like the suspension of its rights in the Council of Europe today. But it will not be able to destroy European security, nor will it be able to throw the world back. We stand and will stand with Ukraine. And as announced today by Prime Minister Rama, Albania, in its tradition, is ready, if needed, to shelter Ukrainians fleeing the war. In conclusion, let me reiterate that Albania supports the sovereignty, territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. And I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Colleagues, not surprisingly, Russia exercised its veto power today in an effort to protect Russia's premeditated, unprovoked, unjustified, and unconscionable war in Ukraine. But let me make one thing clear. Russia, you cannot veto this resolution. You can veto this resolution, but you cannot veto our voices. You cannot veto the truth. You cannot veto our principles. You cannot veto the Ukrainian people. You cannot veto the UN Charter. And you will not veto accountability. Responsible members of this Security Council have stood together today in the face of Russia's aggression, and we will continue to stand with Ukraine, supporting it in every way we can. We are united behind Ukraine and its people. Despite a reckless, irresponsible permanent member of the Security Council abusing its power to attack its neighbor and subvert the UN and our international system. This vote showed which countries truly believe in supporting the core principles of the UN and which ones deploy them as convenient catchphrases. This vote showed which Security Council members support the UN Charter and which ones do not. We will be addressing this matter in the General Assembly, where the Russian veto does not apply, and the nations of the world can, will, and should hold Russia accountable and stand in solidarity with Ukraine. Before I conclude, I want to commend the true and tremendous courage we are seeing from the Ukrainian people. I want to thank the Ukrainian permanent representative who is here with us today. Earlier today, President Biden spoke with President Zelensky and personally commended the brave actions of the Ukrainian people who are fighting to defend their country. He also conveyed ongoing economic, humanitarian, and security support being provided by the United States, as well as our continued effort to rally other countries to provide similar assistance. It's hard to imagine what it must feel like to see tanks rolling into your city, to see bombs dropped on your streets, to see soldiers storm your parks and your gardens. But in the face of all of this, everyday Ukrainian people are taking extraordinary actions to protect their children, to protect their country, to defend everything they hold dear. I also want to commend the courage of the thousands of people in Russia who are protesting Putin's war, despite grave risks to their personal safety. They will keep chanting, "No war." They will keep asking how many Russian lives Putin wants to sacrifice for his cynical ambitions. As we move forward, I hope more member states take their cues from this courage and honor all of this bravery with more of our own. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Mr. President, India is deeply disturbed by the recent turn of developments in Ukraine. We urge that all efforts are made for the immediate cessation of violence and hostilities. No solution can ever be arrived at the cost of human lives. We are also deeply concerned about the welfare and security of the Indian community, including a large number of Indian students in Ukraine. The contemporary global order has been built on the UN Charter, international law, and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. All member states need to honor these principles in finding a constructive way forward. Dialogue is the only answer to settling differences and disputes, however daunting that may appear at this moment. It is a matter of regret that the path of diplomacy was given up. We must return to it. For all these reasons, India has chosen to abstain on this resolution. I thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Colleagues, a large majority of the Council has just voted in favour of a resolution aimed at stopping war. The resolution has not been adopted only because of the single veto of the permanent member of this Council who is perpetrating that conflict. Russia claims that its invasion of Ukraine is in self-defence. This is absurd. Russia's only act of self-defence is the vote they have cast against this resolution today. Make no mistake, Russia is isolated. It has no support for the invasion of Ukraine. History will record how we voted today and which countries stood up to be counted in defence of the Charter and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The United Kingdom stands steadfast in support of the Ukrainian people and will hold Russia accountable for its aggression. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of Norway.
President, Norway voted in favor of the draft resolution. We deeply regret Russia's veto. Preventing an ending act of aggression is a direct responsibility of this Council. A veto cast by the aggressor undermines the purpose of the Security Council. It is a violation of the very foundation of the UN Charter. Furthermore, in the spirit of the Charter, Russia, as a party, should have abstained from voting on this resolution. On Wednesday, as we sat here in the Council chamber, we could see the shocking first images of what now amounts to a full-scale Russian invasion of a free and independent UN member state. We can only imagine the hardship the people of Ukraine is going through. With their tanks, missiles, bombs, planes, warships, and cyber attacks, the Russian Federation's aggression not only violates the independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine, it also constitutes a serious breach of international peace and security. Russia has disregarded the very core principle of the rule-based world order that the United Nations has stood for since the Second World War. Let me be absolutely clear. Norway insists that the Russian Federation immediately, completely, and unconditionally stops all fighting and withdraws all of its forces from the territory of Ukraine. Russia must respect the principles and purposes of the UN Charter. Norway expresses full solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in the face of Russian aggression. Indeed, we already see the dire consequences for civilians, with casualties and injuries of large numbers of children, women, and men. We fear increased suffering in the time ahead, with potentially large numbers of casualties and extensive destruction of civilian infrastructure, such as schools, medical facilities, water and electricity plants. We see fighting unfolding in and around urban areas. We are deeply concerned about the long-term and protracted harm to the civilian population caused by such warfare, including by the use of heavy explosive weapons. We already see mass displacement. This will only increase, together with trauma, family separation, and missing persons. The situation is a tragedy, both for individuals and the Ukrainian society at large. The parties to the conflict in Ukraine must comply with their obligation under international law, including human rights law and international humanitarian law, and ensure the protection of the civilian population and detainees. Space for neutral and impartial and independent humanitarian action must be protected to ensure safe, rapid and unimpeded humanitarian access to those in need. We condemn in the strongest possible terms Russia's military aggression against Ukraine. This Council must now carry out the great responsibility of its mandate and act in a determined and united manner to stop the ongoing aggression against a UN member state. We also condemn Belarus for facilitating these attacks. Norway will join our allies and partners in swift and concrete countermeasures. This includes the alignment of Norway to the intensified sanctions of the European Union. Let me conclude by reiterating Norway's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of Ireland.
Mr. President, Ireland voted in favour of the draft resolution presented by the United States and Albania in response to the flagrant violation of the UN Charter, of international law, and of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation has turned its back on diplomacy. It has spurned genuine offers of dialogue and rejected repeated calls from the international community for de-escalation. Instead, it has launched an unjustified and unprovoked attack on Ukraine, an attack that continues today to rain death and destruction on Ukraine and its people. We condemn these actions outright. In casting our vote today, we do so in full solidarity with the people of Ukraine. This Council has a responsibility to act in the face of conflict, to protect international peace and security, to uphold the principles the world agreed upon in response to the utter devastation of the Second World War. This is not a responsibility that Ireland takes lightly, yet it is one that we were prevented from discharging today in spite of the clear and declared will of the great majority of this Council's members. Mr. President, we deeply regret the use of the veto today by the Russian Federation. The veto is an anachronism which has no place in today's world. The use of the veto to block Council action is always unacceptable. Its use today in blatant defence of military aggression is reprehensible. However, the veto in no way obscures the plain facts of Russian aggression against Ukraine, nor will it hinder the international community's response to Russia's blatant breaches of international law, as demonstrated by the broad co-sponsorship of today's resolution by the wider UN membership. In this context, Ireland strongly supports the comprehensive sanctions announced by the European Union yesterday. We stand ready to support further measures if Russia does not reverse course. Mr. President, The unfolding horror of recent days is a tragedy for the people of Ukraine, and one which evokes nightmares that the people of Europe fervently hoped had been consigned to a blood-stained history. Only dialogue and diplomacy offer escape from these nightmares. We call on Russia to end its aggression against Ukraine today, to turn away from war and choose the path of dialogue and diplomacy. This is the right path, and the time to take it is now. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Monsieur le Président,
President,
à cet instant, les missiles russes tuent des civils, bombardent des villes, détruisent des infrastructures essentielles dans le seul but de vassaliser l'Ukraine. Ce sont les rêves de reconquête de l'Empire russe qui sont à l'œuvre ici. L'Ukraine est la victime d'une agression préméditée par le président de la Fédération de Russie. Rien ne pourra jamais la justifier. Aucun membre de ce Conseil ne la soutient. Le résultat du vote de ce jour est clair. La Russie est seule. La France salue la mobilisation de tous les membres de ce Conseil qui, en votant en faveur de cette résolution, ont exprimé leur attachement au droit international et leur soutien à l'Ukraine. Elle condamne le veto opposé par la Russie aux efforts visant à restaurer la paix et l'ordre international. La Russie foule aux pieds les responsabilités que lui confère le statut de membre permanent du Conseil de sécurité. Elle instrumentalise la Charte des Nations Unies pour en violer les principes les plus fondamentaux. Monsieur le Président, au sein des Nations Unies et dans toutes les enceintes, la France continuera de se mobiliser avec ses partenaires pour soutenir l'Ukraine et le peuple ukrainien. Je vous remercie.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Сейчас предоставляю слово представителю Ганы.
To the representative of Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ghana voted in favor of the draft resolution on the situation in Ukraine, which